Hello again. For this video I decided to turn a custom pen. Turning pens is a lot of fun. It's usually a pretty quick process. Right here I have a piece of burl, and I have a mold from, I believe it's Lizard Blanks, for making standard pen molds. So I'm taking the burl and cutting it down, and what I'm going to end up doing is using pieces of the burl with some aluminite resin to make a custom blank for this pen. I've had this piece of burl for about 3-4 months. I used a bigger piece of it for a custom bowl. It's got amazing grain to it. Right here I'm just arranging the pieces of burl into the blank just to make sure everything's going to fit. I wanted to make sure that there was space in there for the resin as well as to see the actual wood. I used some stoners to coat the blank, or excuse me, the mold, just make it a little bit easier when it's done to get it out. Using aluminite slow, going to mix up, I believe it was 100 grams. Turned out to be a little bit too much, but I used 2 different colors, and I wanted to make sure that I had enough. Once it was all mixed up, I poured about half of it into another container so I could mix the 2 different colors. You can't really tell, but the color on the left is kind of like a gunmetal gray. After the blank was poured, I put it in the pressure pot overnight just to make sure I didn't get any air bubbles.
The following day.
Here I'm taking the mold out. It's just a Harbor Freight converted pressure pot. At first I thought I'd really messed up because of how much the colors had blended, but it's really just on the surface. Underneath, you could really see the blue and mixed in with the gray. You'll see that later though. Here I'm just marking the blank so I know where to cut it on the bandsaw. I'm using a cigar pen kit from I believe it's Wood River. I bought it at Woodcraft. On the actual brass inserts, you have to scuff them up to make sure you get a good adhesion to the blank. Just using a piece of old 80 grit sandpaper. Once the blank is cut, I take it over to the drill using a 10mm drill bit to drill a hole for the brass insert. The little pen vise I use isn't the greatest. It tends to move a little bit. Now that the hole is drilled out, I use some Starbond medium thick black to glue the brass insert in. I like to use the black just in case any of the resin is transparent. It kind of hides that shiny brass insert. Once the glue had time to set up, I used a bit to trim down the blank so that the edge of the blank is basically where the pen tube insert starts. When I turn a pen, I like to do each half one at a time. I used to use a longer mandrel, but I wound up getting a lot of issues with it bending, so I'd have uneven blanks. Doing them one at a time on a shorter mandrel seems to work a little bit better. At least it does for me. I used a variety of tools. This is a easy wood tool carbine with a negative rake. I found that the negative rake usually works better for resin. You get less chip out. What I normally like to do is establish the ends of the blank first before I do a lot of shaping in the middle. I think it's important when you turn a pen to get the ends of the material to line up with the fittings of the pen. That way you don't have that large edge catching people's fingers. It just makes it look a lot more smooth and professionally done. Just using a skew now to even everything out. The tool rest I'm using was a homemade one, and the person who welded it for me painted it, and I haven't had a chance to strip the paint off the post, so I think I had it set a little bit high. It was just so tight I couldn't get it to go any further down into the banjo. Now that I have the shape completed, I went through the grits, sanding it, starting with 80 and ending at 800. After I got done using the different sandpapers, I used my homemade abrasive paste to finish it off, and you'll see that here in just a in less than a minute. One thing I've learned, especially with resin, use the sandpaper as the lathe is running, but then in between the grits, turn the lathe off and sand the back and forth. It kind of helps get rid of some of those round sanding marks, or sanding marks that go the direction that the lathe spins. If you enjoy watching my videos, I would sure appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to comment on any of my videos, I do read them all, and I try to respond to all of them. Here I'm using the homemade abrasive paste. If I didn't use this, I probably would have wet sanded. Wet sanding would give maybe even a better finish, but it's a little more, causes more of a mess. Once I was finished with the abrasive paste, I used some Frenchie's polish. It's very similar to the OB Shine Juice. It's just a little bit of a different mixture. I like it a little bit better. I think it applies a little bit easier. I get less streaks with it than with the OB Shine Juice. Now I'm turning the end cap of the pen. I didn't include video of mounting the brass tube or inserting the brass tube or drilling it, just to save a little bit of time. It's the exact same process. end cap, I did have a small void, and you'll see it here in a second. I used the same Starbond medium black to fill the void and sprayed it with some Starbond activator. It ended up blending in really well. Once the finish goes on, you could kind of see how, or why, I called this the ocean pen. The burl parts kind of resemble a sandy beach, and the way the blue and the gray mixed together almost reminded me of waves or whitecaps. Now that both pieces of the pen are done, I used a pen vise to assemble all the parts. My vise doesn't really work very well. It doesn't lock, so it's kind of a pain in the butt. If you are going to do a lot of pens, I'd strongly recommend buying a better vise, one that's a little bit more user-friendly. After it's all put together, I added some photos of the pen at the end of the video. Thanks again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you at the next video.